Hi, my name's Lealia, and my sister hired a private investigator to expose me as a failure. But what she found was that I was never the broken one. They erased my name from a public award I paid for, cropped me out of family photos, called secret interventions about my mental health. And worst of all, they rewrote the will behind my back because I didn't fit the image they sold the world. They thought I was lost, but I was just quiet. So ask yourself, what happens when the failure is the one holding all the receipts? The cold air hit my cheeks as I stepped out of my car. Rochester winters never showed mercy, even in March. I pulled my coat tighter, pausing for a second before entering the community center. Lights spilled out onto the sidewalk from the tall windows, voices inside warm and familiar at least, to some. Inside, people milled about, dressed just formally enough to say this mattered, but not enough to suggest it changed anything. The walls were lined with banners praising local leaders and families. I spotted Callista's, name of course, in gold vinyl letters, elegantly arched above a blown-up photo of her handing a check to a children's clinic. My stomach didn't drop. It hadn't dropped in years. It just tightened. The program began. Speeches, polite laughter, scattered applause. Then came the Community Legacy Honorees segment. I heard the name of our family called out. My fingers curled inside my coat pocket. Let's give a round of applause to the Brennans, especially Callista Brennan, whose unwavering commitment has inspired so many. The host beamed. I waited for my name, maybe even a nod. I got neither. On the screen behind him, a list of donors appeared. One entry read, Ellery Foundation Anonymous Supporter. That was mine. I paid for nearly a third of the event's budget through my company's outreach arm. But my name wasn't there. I felt the silence inside me settle again, like dust on furniture no one planned to touch. Afterward, as people stood to mingle, Callista floated from group to group, a practiced smile on her face. She saw me, offered a tight nod, the kind you give someone you forgot to invite, but still have to acknowledge in public. I left early. The next morning, I woke to a tag notification on Facebook, a photo from a throwback family picnic 7 years ago. I knew the day well. I had organized the entire thing, catered it, even hired the photographer. There were 9 of us in the original image. 8 remained in the cropped version. I was the one edited out. I didn't comment. I didn't like or share it. But I saved it, quietly, into a folder I had never created before that day. Proof. Later that afternoon, I stood at my kitchen counter, staring at my phone. I typed out a message to my mother, then deleted it. I tried again. Deleted again. For years, I'd convinced myself silence was a shield. If I didn't speak up, I wouldn't escalate things. If I let them talk, at least they wouldn't blame me for starting it. But now, it felt more like a cage. It welded shut around myself, one polite omission at a time. That night, I opened my laptop and began saving every public-facing file I could find. Event flyers, donor pages, group messages, even newsletters. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but I knew it was coming. By day, I was CTO of a fast-growing health tech company. I managed multi-million-dollar investor calls, handled security protocols most couldn't begin to understand, and coached younger engineers through crisis-level code meltdowns. I paid off my condo. I drove a 10-year-old Subaru by choice. I donated to shelters under a pseudonym. I had stock options most of my family couldn't pronounce. And I never talked about any of it, because being visible in this family, it was a risk. It meant becoming a target. Callista once said during a podcast interview, which I listened to entirely out of morbid curiosity, that her values came from a family deeply rooted in service and resilience. I nearly laughed. She didn't mention me, of course. She did, however, mention our shared hardships and what it means to guide others who've lost direction. I paused the episode. They wouldn't recognize value if it wasn't attached to her face, I muttered aloud. To no one. But that was about to change. That night, I didn't sleep. I drafted a letter that made silence into a sound they couldn't ignore. The call log was easy to obtain. What surprised me was how early she'd started digging into me. The snow made the roads drag that Sunday. Thick and heavy flakes fell sideways across the windshield as I took the familiar turn onto the narrow street where I grew up. I pulled into the driveway and sat there a moment longer than usual. Even the wind seemed quieter than the stillness inside that house. I walked through the front door right at 6. As always. Coat off, shoes by the side table. No one greeted me from the kitchen, which was already strange. Usually, Mom would shout out something about soup or needing help with the salad. This time, silence. I walked into the dining room and stopped. Everyone was already seated. Elwyn and Lucetta at either end, Callista to the right of Mom. The good china was out. The candles were lit. I noticed the empty chair at the very far end of the table mine. Not the usual spot beside Mom where I used to sit growing up, but like a guest of little consequence. I slid into the seat slowly, scanning their faces. Elwyn cleared his throat and smiled like someone about to read a eulogy. Glad you could make it. Dinner started awkwardly, with polite passing of dishes and scripted remarks about the weather. Then Mom reached under the table and pulled out a manila folder. "We've just been a little worried about you, honey," she said, handing it across. That's all. I stared at the folder without touching it. Callista took the cue. "We put together a few things," she said lightly, like this was a PowerPoint presentation and I was her underperforming intern. "You've bounced around a lot these last few years. That comic book shop? Gone. The online tutoring gig? Disconnected website. I know you're doing something techy now, but no one really knows what it is." I finally opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots of my old jobs, some LinkedIn pages, even a blurry image of me at a previous staff party, one I never posted online. "You've never really had a plan, have you?" Callista said with a smile so polished it cut. I didn't say a word. Mom reached out as if to soften the blow. "We just want to help you get back on track, sweetie. Maybe something steady, a desk job, maybe part-time. You know, so you don't have to depend so much. Depend on what, exactly?" My silence? Elwyn sipped his water and added, "We've been reviewing some estate stuff, just house things, legalities. Callista helped us look into the best arrangement. Nothing's final, of course." I knew what that meant. I didn't need a spreadsheet. They'd removed me from the will, or at least reduced me to a footnote, a logistical afterthought. The reasoning was probably that I was too unstable, not financially consistent, not mentally reliable. Meanwhile, my last tax return included 7 figures, and I quietly funded 2 local nonprofit initiatives. But they never asked. They never looked. That wasn't the part that hurt most. What hit hardest was how sure they seemed, like it wasn't even a question anymore. My failure wasn't assumed. It was canon. I pushed the folder aside and picked up my spoon. "This soup's a little salty," I said quietly. Callista blinked, thrown by the pivot. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I took notes instead of mental ones. Who nodded when Callista spoke? Who looked down? Who added their own little jabs masked as care? I memorized phrases. I memorized who smiled while I was dissected. After dessert, I complimented the pie, kissed Lucetta on the cheek, and said, "Thanks for dinner." They had no idea that by the next morning, my lawyer would already have sent the first request for any documentation tied to changes in the estate. I wasn't playing defense anymore. Driving home, I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I replayed the night like footage on a screen, analyzing voice inflections, body language, gaps between words. When Elwyn spoke about Callista's help, he said it the way someone says finally. They weren't trying to understand me. They were trying to erase me. At home, I opened a new spreadsheet. It wasn't for work. I titled it, "Everything She's Done." The rows were already filling themselves. This wasn't a breakdown. It was the beginning of the case. I had smiled through dessert, but by Monday morning, my lawyer had sent the first request for Callista's paper trail. The email arrived at exactly 7:12 a.m. Subject line, "Client Report Lelia Ellery." I didn't rush to open it. Instead, I brewed my coffee black, strong, unapologetically bitter, and stood by the frost-bitten window, watching yesterday's snow surrender in patches on the railing. I needed that moment of silence, the kind that gives your gut a chance to catch up with your intellect. When I finally opened the file, it wasn't the contents that knocked the breath out of me. It was the precision, the depth, the cold intention behind it. She had pulled everything: employment records, residential history, vehicle ownership, medical billing, tax returns, even a flagged credit inquiry that dated back to a job I never took. And the request hadn't come from her directly. No. Callista had gone through a private investigations firm in St. Paul. The file had all the markers of a lazy cover-up, a generic justification under family legal clarity, and a masked Gmail alias with the name of our childhood dog embedded in the address. That was her trademark. Cruelty wrapped in sentiment. Thanks to my cybersecurity training, it took less than an hour to trace the IP logs, confirm email header signatures, and run a triangulation. It was her. Undeniably, sloppily. Her fingerprints were everywhere. That afternoon, I dialed the PI firm posing as a paralegal representing myself. My voice was steady, detached. The woman on the other end hesitated when I mentioned the case number. Then came the crack. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice lowering. "The request came from Callista Brennan. We were told it was for a guardianship filing, mental health concerns, maybe power of attorney. We didn't know you do now," I interrupted softly. "Send a full copy to my legal counsel, and flag that file for record integrity. Click." I didn't scream. I didn't call Callista. I didn't do the thing most people expect when their sister tries to erase their autonomy. Instead, I folded laundry. Until my phone exploded. 5 alerts in under 60 seconds: group messages, Instagram screenshots, a public Facebook post. Sometimes we love people who just can't get their lives together. We pray for them, but we protect our families first. No names, no direct accusations. But the surgical references were unmistakable. There were whispers of mental instability, vague mentions of addiction cycles, and a carefully worded paragraph about someone in and out of employment, always struggling, always pulling others down. It wasn't passive-aggressive. It was rehearsed. It was calculated character assassination dressed up as Christian concern. I didn't cry. I archived. I saved every post, every like, every snide comment from former friends and mutuals. I logged every DM that came with a fake tone of concern, just checking in, "Are you okay?" No one was really checking on me. They were checking if the rumors were true. That night, I sent a single line to my lawyer. "We don't warn her. We build the case." He replied with one word: "Understood." The next morning, I met Merrick. 3 years had passed since we last spoke. He was the only one who had witnessed both my collapse and the quiet reconstruction of my life. We met at a small cafe across from City Hall. He didn't waste time with small talk. "You look like someone ready to go to war," he said, eyeing my bare face in monochrome gray. "Not war," I replied. "Documentation." I opened the folder and handed him the printed screenshots, the PI report, the metadata logs, the email where my name had quietly disappeared from the nonprofit's official donor list. It wasn't about a single insult or incident. It was a pattern, a coordinated attempt to reframe me as unstable, unreliable, unwanted. "I'm not here to destroy her," I said, voice steady. "I just want to exist on paper and in peace, without being erased." He gave me a slow, knowing nod and slid a legal pad across the table. "What do you need from me?" I pointed to the top. Anonymous background trace. Track what she's gained financially in the past 6 months. If she's used any part of my history, my story, as currency, I want it connected. Merrick's lips curved into a quiet smile. There she is. That night, I created a new folder on my encrypted drive. Title: Case Study C. Brennan. I separated it into 2 categories: public behavior and financial motive. I wasn't just building a case. I was building a mirror, one she couldn't smash with sentiment or sisterhood. If Callista wanted to turn me into a parable of failure, I was going to give her a narrative she couldn't control. I archived every file, every byte of it. By sunrise, My silence had stopped being surrender. It had become a weapon. There comes a time when waiting becomes a form of surrender. I had waited long enough for someone to speak up, for the truth to reveal itself, for her to slip on her own ego. But no more. If she wouldn't trip, it'd press where it hurt legally, publicly, and in ways that couldn't be undone. The gala was held in a high-ceilinged ballroom downtown, all warm chandeliers and rented opulence. The kind of place where linen napkins feel too stiff to be sincere, and everything smells faintly of roses and entitlement. The centerpieces were knockoff elegance faux crystals, soft light, budget modesty, masquerading as refinement. I wore black, sleek, minimal, anonymous. No one noticed. That was the point. I was told this event was meant to honor the people who work in silence, the donors, the architects, the ones who never take credit. But what they meant, evidently, was Callista, because when she stepped up to the podium, every light softened for her. Her dress glittered like authority, and her voice, so carefully trained, carried the room like a symphony of self-congratulation. The screen behind her came alive with photos of newly opened clinics, scholarship recipients holding up certificates, ribbon cuttings at community centers. I recognized every single frame, every location, because I was the one who funded them. Quietly, willingly, not for applause, but for impact. It had been a choice. And then she said it. "I didn't do this alone," Callista began, with a carefully calibrated tremble in her voice. "There were people cheering me on, people who showed up. Some supported us with their presence, and others," she paused for effect. "Well, some people support us just by being there." There was a polite wave of chuckles, a soft swell of applause, and just enough ambiguity for her to look generous without actually naming a soul. From the front row, the CEO of the organization gave me a brief, nervous glance. He looked like he wanted to intervene. He didn't. I sat still, my hands in my lap. I didn't flinch. This wasn't the moment. Not yet. On the ride home, I sat in the back of Callista's luxury SUV, beside her daughter, Inez. She was tapping away on a tablet, legs swinging, her little heels rhythmically kicking the seat. A moment passed before she asked, casually and without looking up, "Do you really not have a job?" The question floated in the air like a slap wrapped in silk. "Mom says you're kind of like a dreamer. Like you do stuff, but no one really knows what." I looked at her calmly. "I do have a job. It's just not on Facebook." She blinked, looked mildly confused, then wrinkled her nose. "Are you poor?" "No, sweetheart," I said gently, offering a small smile. "I just don't buy attention." She went back to her tablet, the question already forgotten. But I didn't forget, because children echo what adults don't realize they're shouting. They absorb the tone, the dismissiveness, the invisible judgments. I didn't blame her. I blamed the woman who taught her that value was a performance and silence meant failure. The next morning, I opened my laptop and pulled up the most recent signed contract with the startup Callista had just praised herself for. My name was there in clear font: co-founder, silent partner, equity holder, not a footnote, a fact. I typed out a message to the CEO. "Next time, let the public thank the right person. I won't always be silent." 2 hours later, his reply arrived. "Understood. You deserved the credit." I didn't need his guilt. What I needed was the trail, the paper trail, the truth, documented and dated. That afternoon, I dragged the message into a secure archive folder, nestled it right beside screenshots of grant disbursements, donor emails, and an audio file Callista on the phone with a local journalist, casually claiming the entire project had been her brainchild. It wasn't revenge. It was a correction. That night, I stood at the kitchen counter, sipping tea brewed strong, staring out the window as the last of the daylight folded into shadow. I thought again about Ina's voice in the back seat, how her words had mirrored Callista's, how even children learn to measure worth in likes, headlines, and applause. I clicked open my spreadsheet, a simple file titled Incidents for Council. The list was getting long. I added 2 more rows. Credit falsely accepted at public gala. Child echoing false narrative. Likely coached. It wasn't about convincing anyone. Not anymore. It was about lining up the facts quietly, methodically. Because one day, when the unraveling begins, I want the record to be indisputable. I want them to see how the rope was twisted, where the lies were looped, and how long it'd been watching. Because silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. The dress was plain. My intention was right. I didn't go to be seen, I went to draw a line. The call came mid-morning, 2 days after the gala. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing internal audit summaries, when Merrick's name flashed across my screen. I hadn't spoken to him since the meeting at the CAF. "Hey," he said. "Got a second?" "Always." He got straight to it. Callista reached out. "She emailed me last night." I stood up slowly, walking to the window with the phone pressed to my ear. "She said she's compiling a record," Merrick continued. "Wanted to know about your career history, your temperament under pressure. She was careful with her wording, said she assisting with some sensitive family planning. Sounded like legal cover to me." My fingers tapped the window pane. "Did you respond?" I told her I wasn't comfortable talking about someone behind their back, especially someone who made me a hell of a lot of money. I let out a short breath through my nose. She never learned subtlety. I saved the email. "You'll want it for your records." That night, I called Callista. I didn't text. I didn't give her the grace of scheduling. She picked up with her usual clipped tone. "Lealia, I know you contacted Merrick." A beat of silence. Then her voice shifted calm, almost amused. "I did. I thought it would help you." "Help?" "You've been spinning, jumping from one vague project to another. I thought it was time someone did something instead of just watching you spiral." I didn't raise my voice. "You don't get to define my spiral. I'm trying to protect you. You live in this fantasy bubble." I could hear her breathing through her nose, tight, controlled. She thought she was saving face. I wasn't interested in her mask. "This time," I said evenly, "every email, every call, every liar, not just going to walk away from it. I'm documenting everything. And next time, I won't ask anyone to believe me. I'll make sure they see it." She hung up. I opened my laptop and typed a new message. To her, CC'd to my attorney. Subject, Notice of Defamation and Harassment Monitoring. Attached were timeline entries, conversation screenshots, her email to Merrick. I added a list of prior incidents, each labeled with a date and a witness. No accusation, no pleading, just facts. 24 hours later, I heard nothing. Merrick came by the next evening. He brought a file folder and a 6-pack of ginger beer. We sat across from each other in my kitchen, papers between us, silence floating on top of the carbonation. "She's trying to build a case," he said. "Or at least, a narrative. But she doesn't realize you've already built yours. She always mistakes confidence for chaos," I replied. He pulled out one printout Callista's original email, annotated with his notes and timestamps. "Just in case you need to show this crossed a professional line." I nodded slowly. "Next time, there won't be any discussion, just exposure." Before he left, Merrick paused by the door. "You sure you want to go through with this?" "She made the choice," I said. "I'm just removing the mask." Later that night, I posted something simple on my profile. No hashtags, no subtweets, just a sentence. Sometimes silence isn't humility. It's strategy. The post sat there for hours with no engagement. Then, a quiet like from a second cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Then, another from someone I barely remembered from high school. No comments, no drama, just ripples. At midnight, I received a message from Orletta. "Took me too long to learn that lesson," she wrote. "Glad you didn't wait that long." I didn't respond. I just read it twice. Then saved it. Some messages don't need a reply. They just need to be remembered. I wasn't planning to go to the fundraiser. But when I saw her name on the speaker list, I changed my mind. I woke up to 23 missed calls and a reputation on fire. It was war now, and I wasn't blinking first. The report landed in my inbox on a Monday. I had been reviewing quarterly shareholder summaries for the health tech startup when a number caught my eye. My number. Or at least, what used to be mine. Voting rights tied to my equity stake had been redirected, temporarily reassigned to a third-party proxy. I blinked once, then twice. It wasn't a mistake. The file had been signed, notarized, and accepted. I forwarded the report to my attorney and asked for the filing trail. Within 24 hours, I had my answer. The proxy was tied to a holding account linked to a consulting firm managed by Callista. She hadn't just tried to undermine me personally. She tried to move the boardroom chairs while I wasn't looking. The next morning, my attorney sent a cease and desist, along with revocation of all proxy access and a copy of the internal memo that clearly outlined the breach. I didn't call her. I didn't send a message. She knew what it was. By Sunday, the usual dinner loomed, and despite every fiber in my body screaming to decline, I drove the familiar route. The wind felt crueler than usual, slicing past my windshield like blades. But the cold wasn't what made me shiver. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and chicken when I walked in, just like always. Callista was already seated. Elwyn and Lucetta were at the table, napkins folded neatly. I set my coat down and sat. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. Midway through the meal, while spooning mashed potatoes onto his plate, Elwyn muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "She wouldn't last a week without family money. She only knows how to spend it." No one flinched, not even Lucetta. Callista kept chewing, slowly, as if the comment were a lullaby. I stood. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single folder, placing it in the center of the table. Inside, printouts of my investment portfolio, bank statements, charitable donation receipts, and a summary of the foundations I quietly fund. "I figured it was time you saw the version of me that doesn't fit your bedtime stories," I said calmly. Elwyn raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Lucetta stared at the papers, mouth slightly open. I didn't let the silence stretch too long. "You're all entitled to your fiction, but don't expect me to keep acting in it." Callista dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin. "So what? You want a trophy now?" I met her eyes. "No, I want my name back. And I'll take it legally if I have to." Lucetta's eyes welled with tears. "Lealia, this isn't the way." I didn't let her finish. The way would have been honesty. 10 years ago. Callista gave a small laugh. "So you're finally standing up?" "Congrats. Should we clap?" "You don't get to speak for me anymore," I said, "and you won't speak over me again." I picked up my coat, tucked the folder back under my arm, and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw plates or make a scene. I left before dessert. Before they could dismiss me or laugh it off. Before I could be cast as dramatic again. That night, I slept well. 3 days later, her response wasn't a phone call. It was a smear campaign, the loudest one yet. I didn't need a stage. I needed the truth, and this time, it was mine to deliver. 4 days passed before I fully grasped the scale of her response. It started with a simple message from Merrick. "You need to see what she posted." I opened the link, expecting a snide meme or another backhanded jab dressed in spiritual jargon. But this was something else entirely. Callista had written a long-winded public post on Facebook. It opened with syrupy empathy. "Mental health is something we must all take seriously." And then came the veiled attack. Some people battle quietly, others lash out. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is love them from a distance. She didn't need to say my name. Everyone close enough already knew. It was choreographed. Every sentence crafted for maximum implication, minimum liability. Just vague enough to dodge a legal challenge. Just pointed enough to destroy my credibility. And it worked. The comment section filled fast. "So brave of you. Sending prayers for your strength. Protect your peace, sis." Then came the LinkedIn version, refined, corporate, and cold. "Leadership is knowing when to walk away from instability. Boundaries are not cruelty. Shed-dressed character assassination in the language of self-care." My inbox exploded. Cousins, old coworkers, even people I hadn't spoken to since college reached out offering support. thinly veiled pity, and in some cases, backhanded validation. Are you okay? Saw the post? If you ever need someone to talk to, you're not alone, Ro. We're here for you. I ignored most of them. Then, one message stopped me cold. My cousin Marcus. A screenshot of the family group chat. It had been renamed Family Core Updated. I wasn't in it. Callista was listed as the admin. Below that, someone had typed, "Let's keep things peaceful, only constructive voices here." Translation: voices that won't challenge her version. I stared at the image for a long time. No tears, no rage. Just a numb sort of ache, the kind that settles deep when you realize someone you grew up with is actively working to erase you. Later that week, I sat across from my lawyer, who had shifted from legal strategist to evidence curator. He reviewed the screenshots with a steady calm. "She's baiting you," he said, tapping one of the posts, trying to trigger a public reaction. "But every vague jab she posts? That's a breadcrumb. Let her keep dropping them, and I just stay quiet?" "No," he said. "You stay factual, not loud, strategic." That evening, I visited Orletta. She had texted earlier that week, inviting me for tea. Her place was quiet, nestled beneath thick branches that filtered the setting sun into soft golden streaks. We sat on her porch, cupping warm mugs like lifelines. She didn't dance around it. "Callista came to see me last week," she said, voice low. "She said you weren't well, told me to distance myself, said she was worried about you." I waited. She looked up. I almost believed her. I didn't move. Just let the silence settle before I said, "Did you?" "No," she said. "But I thought about it. That scared me." I nodded, not in anger but recognition. That was Callista's skill, not just dividing people, but making them question their own instincts. I reached across the table knot to hold her hand, but to place mine near hers. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Now I know exactly what I'm up against." That night, I didn't rant. I didn't retaliate. I opened my laptop and began drafting an email titled, "Counter Narrative." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was precise. To the family, I began. If my silence has created confusion, allow me to clarify. I am not unstable. I am not lost. I am not a problem to be managed in whispers. Attached were receipts, legal documents, email records, financial statements, and written accounts. Nothing weaponized, just truth laid bare. Not to win, not to fight, but to anchor the record. My reality is not hers to rewrite. I signed it with my full name, not Ro, the name on my birth certificate, the name she could not alter. And I hit send. She didn't reply. Of course she didn't. Instead, she tried to steal the microphone at the next gala. The days that followed weren't loud, but they were clear, and that was enough for me to move forward. The gala had always been predictable: polished name tags, overpriced floral arrangements, a program printed in heavy cardstock that no one read but everyone held, folded politely between their hands like it meant something. I arrived at the Minneapolis Marriott 15 minutes early, wearing navy and quiet resolve. At check-in, a woman in pearls and too much blush leaned in. "Hi, Ms. Ellery. Small change in the program. Your remarks will now be included under the opening tribute, led by your sister." My hand didn't tremble as I handed her a printed email. "That's odd," I said, calm as concrete, "because this confirms my own segment. Approved, sponsored, and legally binding." She took one look at the signature, blinked, and said, "Of course." "Right this way." Inside the ballroom, I found my seat near the center left of the room, tucked between a local arts council rep and a junior developer I'd mentored last fall. I watched Callista glide from table to table like a politician in chiffon. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The event began. The lights dimmed. A hush fell. When her name was announced, the applause rose fast, familiar, practiced. She took the stage with a slight tilt of her head, the kind she reserved for sympathy and superiority. Her speech began with vague tributes to community, resilience, and weathering storms within families. She thanked organizations for allowing second chances and referenced those of us who've had to carry the weight of others' mistakes. Her voice wavered in all the right places. She ended with, "And to those who need the spotlight to feel valid, I truly hope they find peace." The audience clapped. I waited. I counted to 6. Then I stood. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I walked to the podium, passing her without a glance. "Good evening," I began. I prepared something different, but it seems clarification is more useful than celebration. I've been called many things recently: unstable, delusional, dangerous by proximity. Most of those claims live in private whispers, but some were made public. And since we're gathered here in public, I'd like to offer a correction. No one coughed, no glasses clinked. I'm not here to reclaim an image. I'm here to tell the truth. Support is not control. Love is not erasure. And silence is not guilt. You can serve a community by rewriting your family narrative to suit your press release. You don't build integrity by deleting people who make your story complicated. I haven't asked for credit. But tonight, I won't accept distortion. I stepped back. 5 seconds of silence stretched into a full breath before the applause began. Slow, then sharper, focused. Some still hesitated, but others didn't. As I walked off stage, I saw her still seated, jaw tight, one hand clenching the program like it might fly off without her. Then I heard it. A voice from the back. I spent 30 years letting this family tell me who I was. It was Aunt Orletta. She stood, unshaken. Tonight, I stop, and I stand with her. Gasps rippled. Heads turned. One uncle stiffened. 2 cousins looked at the floor. But it was done. The next hour blurred. I signed my donation renewal, declined interviews, shook 3 hands I didn't recognize. Callista didn't speak to me. She didn't have to. In the car, on the way home, I opened my phone to a message from Orletta. The next chapter of our family begins when we choose not to repeat the last. I stared at her words until they stopped feeling foreign. Then I leaned back into the seat. For the first time in years, the silence surrounding me felt entirely mine. I didn't need applause. I needed distance, and maybe that was finally allowed. A month passed. No more statements. No more curated subtweets. No family dinners or damage control group chats. Just space. And in that space, a stillness I hadn't realized I was starving for. Some relatives called, hesitantly, as if unsure whether I was safe to speak to or already radioactive. A few offered apologies, mostly vague and padded in disclaimers. We didn't know the full story, it got out of hand. You know how families can be. I listened. I didn't argue. I also didn't offer reassurance. I'd stopped performing comfort. Callista didn't reach out, not directly. But she also didn't post anything since the gala, not even her usual charity selfies. Silence from her wasn't a peace offering. It was consequence. Then, without fanfare, a letter arrived from Elwyn. Cream envelope, his handwriting on the front. Inside, a single sheet. Lealia, your name has been reinstated in the will. This was never personal. Dad. It wasn't an apology. It was paperwork. I didn't reply. I made an appointment with my lawyer instead. In a short meeting over coffee and legal pads, I signed a formal statement waiving my right to any inheritance. I've built what I need, I told him. I don't need what was used to keep me in line. That Saturday, Orletta stopped by. No text beforehand. Just the soft knock of someone who used to wait for permission but no longer needed it. We had tea in the sunroom, no small talk, just warmth. They came after me too, she said quietly. Subtle jabs, side comments. But something strange happened. I got calls. From cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. From your mother's old friend, Ruth. Even your uncle. They said it was the first time someone stood up without falling apart. I looked up from my mug. And did you tell them you've been standing up longer than they noticed? She smiled, tired. I wish I had done what you're doing. I didn't. I reached across and touched her wrist gently. It's not too late to stop carrying someone else's story. The next morning, I opened a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were old photographs, holidays, graduations, the forced smiles of performative love. I sat with them on the living room floor, flipping through frame by frame. Some had Callista, some didn't. I didn't rip them. I didn't burn anything. I also didn't feel the need to hang any of them up. I started placing the photos in a new album. But this one wasn't chronological. It wasn't for nostalgia. It was for truth. A single label on the first page. What actually happened. Later that week, I went for a walk through Silver Lake Park. It was early evening, the sky a soft lavender, the cold still lingering, but no longer biting. Kids played on the other side of the water. Dogs barked in the distance. Life went on around me, uninterrupted by what I'd spent the last year untangling. I stopped on a bench and let my eyes close. I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting for anyone to change. I was simply finished, not healed, not whole, but done with the version of me they insisted I be. And in that, there was a quiet power. I whispered aloud, not to anyone but myself. It took everything to get here. But I got here. Maybe the most painful part wasn't what they said, it was what they never bothered to ask. For years, I confused my silence with strength. I thought staying quiet meant keeping the peace. But I've learned that peace without truth is just another form of control. If I could offer anything to someone watching this, it's this. You don't owe anyone your invisibility, especially not to make them more comfortable. You are allowed to be seen, to be heard, and to rewrite the story they tried to tell about you. It's never too late to step out of the role someone else assigned you. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the same seat at the same table. Sometimes it means building a new one entirely and inviting only those who never questioned your right to be there. So let me ask you, have you ever stayed silent just to keep the peace? Have you ever let someone else's version of you become louder than your own voice? If this story resonated with you, leave a 1 in the comments or tell me what state you're watching from. Love to know where you're tuning in. And if you didn't like it, tell me why. Your thoughts matter. And hey, if you're new here and this video touched your heart, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is speak.